We're talking about how fast can we actually fill up a position.
Empowering women, giving them the platform to come out.
Instilled this passion to help refugees.
We're here to discuss the future, and we're here to eat all this yummy food.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this edition of a Working Lunch with Nordin. Today, we've got two guests with us, James Stevenson, or as he likes to be called, Jamie, and Adam Dahlan. Thank you very much. The team behind Radiance Asset Management, Radiance Asset Berhad, my apologies. But really, we're here to talk about what's going on with technology. We're really here to talk about what that means for investment. We're here to understand what are the opportunities, what are the threats also. And I really want to start by opening the floor and saying, Jamie, tell us a little bit about what your company does and why you're here today.
Hi, Nordin. Good afternoon. Thank you for letting us join the show. It's a pleasure to be here, and we appreciate your kind invitation. I think, in summary, Radiance Assets Berhad is it's a Sharia-compliant investment holding company based here in Malaysia. What we are trying to do, our raison d'etre, is we are investing in a number of assets, not just in Malaysia, globally, but we're investing in a number of assets in industries and in companies that are bringing modern technology to help develop the global economy and directly help recover from the terrible pandemic that all the countries around the world are currently experiencing. A key industry and business for us is actually our Fintech business, which is being run by Adam Dahlan, who's the fellow speaker on the call, and I'll let him speak in a few moments. But we're also looking, as well as Fintech, we're also looking at other areas, including clean tech, meditech, we're also looking at edutech. So we're trying to find different opportunities that we can, of course, use to help recover from COVID and help develop the global economy. I think this is something that we're all in the company very keen to do. I believe most people around the world are actually very keen to have some assistance and some direction in helping them recover from this terrible pandemic. And I think collectively we can do a lot of good for people. I think the scope of our remit is very broad. As long as we remain Sharia compliant, we have a very broad remit, both from a geographic perspective, but also from an industry perspective. And it's already been noticeable that Fintech has evolved dramatically, I think, in the last 1.5 years, driven by the problems that many companies are experiencing, working from home, for example, with so many employees having to work from home, obviously access to banks, financial institutions, and so on. So Fintech has been a very key focus for many people, and it's a very big area of our focus. So Adam's actually running the largest area. So please, Adam, if you could describe briefly a little bit about your Fintech business and Radiance Pay, please.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jamie and Nordin, for having us here today. And good afternoon to everyone who's listening in. Well, very happy to share that the growth of Fintech has taken leaps and bounds. I think we can see a lot of, not say acquisitions, but a lot of fundraising exercises happening almost on a daily basis for Fintech companies. And it's pretty much at a very good time where we come in. And our focus is basically to help the enterprises, the businesses, the mom and pops, every genre of every type of business to move into the digitalization of their business. And fundamentally behind that would be the ability to collect and to make and receive payments seamlessly throughout the whole business cycle. And I think we can see with the current growth of a very encouraging digital banking licensing participation that's happening here in Malaysia and pretty much around the region also. We see that the digital need and the Fintech movement is really at the right time for us to come in. And how does that bring in good benefits to not just business owners, but even users, is around the safety elements that have been put in place to ensure fintech drives the movement of funds, at the same time the movement of businesses seamlessly, and not just within the local economy, but even internationally. I think that's somewhere that's where we focus on, and we like to see ourselves as one of the players in this segment. And some of the products and services that we have developed are around that, the enablement of easy product sharing, the easy payment collections, easy recording, all into a singular platform, from not just payments, but even recurring payments, and building a simplified page to help you promote your product, but at the same time getting it to the masses easily. So I think
Okay.
one of the main things that we are very keen to move forward and very passionate in.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you, Adam. Now, I've got and Jamie. Are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
We were okay, great. We were talking before the show about countries that have gone forward with digitization. Of course, COVID-19 has driven this. How far, when we look at Malaysia, if we look at ASEAN, and if we draw circles out wider, who is leading the way in this digitization, and what is at stake if we don't get it right?
That's a really interesting question, Nordin. Thank you very much. Interestingly, before I moved to Malaysia, I was in China for more than a decade. And it was very interesting when I first arrived in China to see how they had already digitalized far more than any other country I'd seen. And I'm not just talking about Southeast Asia, I'm talking about the UK, US, Europe. They have been using digital payments via QR codes pretty regularly now for at least 10 years, probably more, 12 or 13 years. And it's now very sophisticated. In many cases, people no longer carry cash. If you get a taxi, in my most recent experiences there, they actually didn't carry cash. If you gave them a 50 yuan note, they couldn't change it. They wanted you to pay them via their WeChat account. So you would scan their QR code on their phone, or they might have a little tag hanging from their review mirror. You just scan it and you pay them the fare, done instantly. And that developed into really many other industries. And they have staffless convenience stores now. I've actually been looking at these quite closely recently as a potential investment area, because you can go into these convenience stores. There's no person working in there. They restock them on a daily basis, or in some cases, the busy ones, twice daily basis. It's all convenience food, but it's in a chilled, what's best described as a container. You get a container vessel or a lorry. They do them up very nicely inside. They're all refrigerated. You can buy ice creams, you can buy cold drinks, you can buy instant noodles, you can buy vegetables. Literally, you pay straight from your WeChat or your Alipay QR code on your phone. It's very, very simple. It's very smooth. So things are really progressing in China very, very fast. Many countries in the world now are playing catch up, and I use the term catch up because we are probably 10 years behind China in that regard. But many companies now are realizing that without this automation, without this fintech development, you're going to find many companies getting left behind. In many cases now, all of us are restricted to our home or our apartment complex. We can't go out easily. One person or two people are allowed to go out and shop, and it has to be within 10 kilometers of your home, and so on. So people are now resorting to using electronic payment systems, and this is one where our fintech business is really helping. But this, again, we're playing catch up with China, because they have been literally doing this for more than a decade. And I think countries or companies that don't keep up with that progress will definitely be left behind. And that has huge balance sheet implications for companies, but also economic issues for the governments as well.
We see here some questions from Siti and Shamita about digital economy. What is the importance of digital technology during the pandemic? What is Malaysia is taking many steps, and the government has put out the digital master plan and the blueprint, what should companies do, putting aside what the government does, what should companies do? What's their first step?
My personal view, and Adam, I'll defer to you in a second to pass comment on my response to that. I think one of the hard parts is many of the senior management in companies are perhaps in their 30s, their 40s, their 50s, maybe even 60s. And they've been accustomed to doing things the same way for 10, 20, 30 years. It's very hard to change those habits. And one of the things I find, management is very reluctant to try new things. They don't want to risk trying new things. And unfortunately, life is a risk. We have to look at these opportunities. We have to manage and mitigate the risks, but we have to take those opportunities to progress. No risk can be completely removed. There's always going to be some risk, yes. I appreciate that, but they must be mitigated and where possible removed. But top management have to really start thinking about change management. That's a very important thing. And I think smaller companies, particularly SMEs, they really suffer because they have a limited scope of people they can approach and bring into it. When you have an MNC within 10, 5, 2 different countries, it doesn't matter. You have a great scope of people you can actually approach and ask for their advice, their thoughts, and putting these ideas collectively will help a multinational actually develop. SMEs don't really have that pool of talent and pool of new ideas. Adam, what are your thoughts?
Well, I would like to first start saying that the pandemic definitely has put in a push factor. So for those who are fearful, enterprises or companies who are really didn't think about it, but based on my experience right now, a lot have already been moving forward and very keen to now embrace the digital path. And with new policies and regulations that have been put in place to spur that movement, we see that definitely companies will have to embark on that. And I'm happy to see that a lot of the micro businesses and even the SMEs have gone down that path. They're taking the lead now with providing their services online. So e-commerce has now been the new shift, and next would be moving into ensuring that safety nets are put in place. I think one of the newer parts of how Fintech has enabled this, slowly shift out the fear, is ensuring that there are stringent automated security elements put in place, like KYC, digital KYC, digital payments, secure instruments, and right now even biometric payments being introduced to ensure you can go out even without your phone soon and just use your face or fingerprint just to make a payment. So that definitely has helped in moving the digital technology and digital economy into an alignment. And it's very good timing that introduced this year.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that. One of the things that Shafira just asked, what is dangerous? What are the fear factors? I mean, we talk about human factors. We talk about cybersecurity risks. We talk about all kinds of hear of what type of attacks are those? Cybersecurity. Sorry, second, ransomware. That's the word I was looking for. Ransomware. How bad is it? Do companies also, while they look at the positive side of this, need to gear up their understanding of cybersecurity? So it's not just, we're not just dealing with all the fluffy happy moments of the digital economy, but it's the same. If you have a building, you'll put a security guard in the front there, and you'll have some protection. May not be all the protection you need, but what role will cybersecurity play in fraud, dealing with these type of attacks, and how important is it that we communicate to the people, business people in that sense?
Well, let me take that part there, Jamie. see, I would like to address this from what we have taken within ReadyPay on how to handle and basically harmonize the entire process. Today, digital economy is just not about taking your business online. It is also putting in a balance and ensuring not just the banking infrastructure supports that number of growth into transactions, but at the same time, other supporting services like even e-government services being put in place. And one of the things that we have done is to ensure that our security posture is keeping up with what's new. And to do that, we put in new processes, new devices and tools to ensure that not just KYC, focus just on KYC, because that's just one part of the hurdle. The other part is the ongoing threats that we get. How do we do that? Now, bells and whistles have to be put in place. And one of the things which I'm happy to share is that besides looking at a payment perspective, we look at it holistically by putting in machine learning and artificial intelligence to look into scrutinizing the transactions that's coming in. All of this happens at the background. Of course, that when we look into all of this, the knowledge behind our privacy in terms of data that we collect, all of it falls in place. But fundamentally, it is all about putting the safety nets and confidence for users, particularly the business owners. And today, the business owners are not just the big enterprises. Today, we have got a lot more transactions and a lot more interest coming from the next level of the upcoming new businesses, from the SMEs and the micro businesses today, which we really need to support them, making up part of the bigger GDP that's coming into the country itself.
You mentioned the GDP, and Jamie, I want to come back to you and ask you. We now have a pandemic, and for all intents and purposes, whether it's a year or 2 years or a month that it'll be over, in reality, there'll be another problem coming up, which will stop us from traveling or doing this or doing that. And you guys are both smiling because you know it's true. There's always going to be the next big problem. Now, one of the things that I was very, very bullish about is this idea of a global gig economy. So instead of just an accountant working in Malaysia, I say, why don't offer your services in Australia or New Zealand? How can now this digital equation work for people beyond Grab drivers who are part of the quote-unquote gig economy now?
I think it's actually a very key point, because I'm a very much pro-globalization. I really believe in globalization. I've been blessed with working in many countries around the world during my professional career, and I've seen the opportunities that are available by not just focusing on your own market or your own economy. So I'm very much in favor of globalization. There are tremendous benefits. There are downsides, of course, but I believe the benefits outweigh the issues. And one of the key things in this subject that's actually come up recently is this new global tax policy that's being driven by the US government, by Biden, President Biden. He's trying to ensure that digital businesses particularly, but MNCs more generally, pay a minimum rate of tax, because so many of them, when you're a big company, you can afford to engage very experienced, very knowledgeable tax experts that can find ways to minimize your tax pay. That's obviously not really an acceptable thing from most individual countries, and they want to have their fair share of the revenues. For example, there are a number of major MNCs that pay virtually no tax in the United Kingdom, for example, yet they have tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars worth of turnover in that country, but they actually pay very little tax. So one of the first steps towards that is going to be having a unified minimum tax policy. From that, once that's established and in place, then I think we may see opportunities for nations to integrate more closely. You've got different accounting policies in pretty much every nation in the world. If we can get standardized accounting policies around the world, that would be very beneficial, of course. Banking processes, although there is a global perspective, KYC, and anti-money laundering checks need to be implemented to a minimum standard around the world. So I think as time progresses, we will see more of these benefits as tax policies, as accounting policies, as banking policies, for example, just as three quick examples, get unified around the world. That will give opportunities for us to develop on a global perspective.
Nice. Because one of the things that I see, and of late, you see a global billionaire class who are very much focused on going to space. In the last few weeks, we're seeing a lot of space tourists. And one of the things that we see a lot of is questions around how much are these companies contributing back to society as opposed to going on expensive flights to near space. But when we Sharifa has asked us about threats, and she mentioned now about investors. Now, when investors look at investing, and this for me is a very important question because we see a lot of companies raising funds at the moment, see a lot of startups actually starting to grow. Now, as an investor, and for the investors also joining the show today, what are some of the things that, again, they may be in their 50s, 60s, or 70s, they may have no idea about cybersecurity. What should investors know about threat analysis in the digital economy in terms of where they should put their money?
Okay. That
Sorry,
pretty much.
I give you all the easy questions, Jamie, and all the difficult questions go to Adam. So.
Well, it's a very interesting question, and something which we, as an investor, I've met a lot of investors, and one of the, I would say, the toughest point to always convince an investor is when we come up to the portion of security. There are many purviews when it comes to that, not just from the continuance of the business. Should something go wrong online, something goes wrong offline, threats along the way, being shut down due to phishing or all of that. Well, today there is always a balance that whenever we meet with an investor, knowing that we are clear on what we can actually provide, where are our safety nets, what do we do to mitigate risks, what do we do to mitigate the technological risks, all of that has to be spelled out. And what makes an investor happy or comfortable is that we have actually thought it through. Many of times when be any kind of investor, be it angels or even institutional, they are definitely going to be very keen on how do they get back their investments. And threats like this online is something which is beyond anyone's control. Something new comes up. So again, I mentioned just now on us the security posture that we take. It is really the onus is on us as business owners to ensure that we take that in a stride. We know what we are doing. We know where we could be facing threats with. But of course, not everything we know. We will have to build readiness and have a team ready for that to prepare ourselves. And there are many consultants out there that we can leverage on and provide that service. Now, one key thing which I normally would like to share with investors is that with this new change in economy, with I would say with the pandemic that's happening right now, then they need to move forward, and the support for investors to go into the digital space for businesses is very, very much needed. And I think if anything, by and large, both the business owners and the investors have to really join forces to build that posture. One way is to have the investors' own security posture, their own security team, their own institution that looks into managing the technology security nets around, so that whenever they go into an investment with an investee, that element is already prepared for. I think that's one way that both investor works together with.
I like that approach. And Daniel's asked a question. So has Nopisa. Two things. I mean, one is privacy and security online, and then we see this term ESG. Now, within the framework of ESG, again, we start to realize that sometimes companies don't get it right. And you guys are Sharia compliant. You guys look through that Sharia lens. How does that help with getting the I was going to say ESPN because I've been watching football too much. How does that help with your ESG approach, and what is that moving forward for us as investors?
Okay, I guess this one's down to me, Adam. I got this one.
Cool.
I think ESG is a very broad definition, and many people have slightly different interpretations of what it means. You know, environmental, of course, is something that many businesses are focusing on, and in fact, the shareholders of many companies now are driving corporations to have a much greater focus on environmental and sustainability. Governance is a key thing, because that in my opinion is very important. Probably out of the three of them, it's the most important, because governance can actually drive the ESG thinking. And I think that governance comes from experience, it comes from training. So I think it's very important that company managers, executive management in particular, are kept up to speed with all of the local as well as the international legislation that governs their particular industry. Now, many different industries have different aspects which they can focus on, particularly with environmental and sustainability. But providing the management is kept up to speed and are fully appraised of the current regulations and practices, I think they should be able to govern their businesses and indeed their industry in a much better way. And I actually get asked regularly whether there is still value in obtaining an MBA, for example. And I personally do believe there is. I actually did my postgraduate education many years after I started working. I was doing it as a sort of part-time basis. And I learned a huge amount from the MBA training. Now, that's just one example. That's very generic. It is expensive, yes, I grant you. But I think the things that I learned in terms of governance, my focus was international business, with a particular focus on business in emerging markets, which has been the area of specialization I've had for my industry for many years. I do believe there is value in that, but I equally believe there is great value in things like the CFA, for example. I'm not an accountant, but the CFA is a great professional qualification to get. ACCA, ACA also. But I'm a member of the Institute of Directors in the UK, and I found great knowledge and experience from the Institute of Directors in the UK. There's actually a similar body here in Malaysia, there's one in Hong Kong. But I think as executive management, you can learn a lot from professional institutions like this, but also there's always another ear to listen to. If you have a problem, you can approach some of the other directors and you can have a conversation with them, and you can get a really good understanding of other people's perspectives. So I think institutions like the Institute of Directors, professional bodies like CFA, ACCA, etc., they provide great support for leaders, and that will help them develop and manage their ESG aspects, and of course support their shareholders.
Mm-hmm. We see Sheila has also touched on this idea of emerging issues and emerging trends, and she brought up the point of policymakers. And when we talk about policy, how do governments regulate is one, but before you regulate, you have to get your policy position right. Are companies or should companies engage with the government to help develop that policy if there is a gap between government policymakers and the corporate sector, who I would imagine are moving much faster than the government sector, especially now with many governments just focused on dealing with the pandemic.
Yeah.
What do you guys think there?
Nordin, that's a really, really strong, great point, because as I just mentioned, places like the Institute of Directors, they act as a buffer between corporate and the government. They advise the government regarding their policies. They help business implement government policies. I don't know if this is a fair statement in such a very public forum, but the governments tend to be playing catch up a lot. When something goes wrong, they act on it and they respond to it. Industry tends to use the term you just used a moment ago. They tend to move faster. They're constantly evolving and developing. So I think it is difficult for governments to continually be proactive, whereas industry is very proactive and moves much faster. So I think, unfortunately, we need to rely on bodies like the Institute of Directors to represent directors and boards, and indeed the shareholders, to the governments, and help them to drive policy in a much more proactive way. That's my personal opinion. I hope I haven't upset too many politicians by making that statement.
No, you haven't. Yeah, I don't think so. And I think one of the things, Daniel, thank you for your comments and questions today, Daniel. And he's also pointed out both Malaysia and Bank Negara, of course, MOF as well, are doing their part to kind of drive this as much as they can during this pandemic. Now, the earlier question I asked was, what is at stake? And what kind of things will happen for businesses if they get it right. For me, this is a case of, if you don't get it right, you get it wrong. And if you get it wrong, you get left behind. Is that going to be the reality for businesses in the next, almost you could say next week, next month, and next year? How rapidly do we need to adopt digital technology? How rapidly do we need to get the digital economy moving in Malaysia?
I think I want to touch on that, because this brings a very something which is very close to my heart, which is the passion around bringing fintech forward. And my personal experience dealing with a few companies in Saudi, in Kazakhstan, and region around us. I'm not going to go too much deep dive inside it, but the play of use of IoT, the not just GovTech, Meditech, Fintech, all of this builds into one particular posture. And I personally like the use of ESG approach, where not just Sharia, but even a basis where all of these technologies and help align policies. And policies not just starts from the government itself. It also starts within ourselves, how we manage our businesses today. And that's one of the main things what we are trying to do here in ReadyPay, is to provide our platform and our policies and our strategies together with the alignment of how new businesses come on board our platform, and the use of AI, ML, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and coupling that with smart intelligence, even to use IoT for that matter, and moving into citizen apps, which is one of the projects which we are going to embark on with a client, is to move into using citizen app as a service, and putting technology and fintech into it, and to cover that into a wider space. So e-commerce platform, one of my partners today, moving into that space, taking not just their own business, their own e-commerce business, but even the I'll call it the social elements around it, what's happening with the white flags. We need to build that persona further, and I'm very happy that Malaysia has moved into a very sound path, and I like that, and it helps us now as business owners and technology providers to help that. And earlier to your question, Nordin, definitely industry players like us will have to come in engagement to help not just our government, but I think by and large every other government should come together and work together with industries, have many engagements with G2Gs to see help move that posture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, Jamie, you've chosen to live in Malaysia. I've also been here for quite some time. Malaysia plays an important role in ASEAN. And Shamita has just asked about investment. And we've seen investment figures go in not possibly the right direction that we want to see them go. How important is it that we use the digital economy and present to foreign investors that, look, Malaysia's got the equation right, not just a wonderful place to live, not just amazing food. Although this is a working lunch with Nordin, and in a normal scenario, we would be at a nice restaurant together. But what do you see as the digital economy's contribution to attracting FDI? And is there a specific type of FDI that the digital economy will bring to the table?
Look, I think FDI is critical, of course, for the Malaysian economy, as it is for many other nations. It's something that's really the lifeblood of the economy. There is a lot of investment within Malaysia, of course, but we need foreign direct investment. And digital transition is critical. Malaysia is already moving that way. The government has, as you said earlier, they've already come out with their master plan. We may see the master plan tweaked and improved over time, but certainly they have a core master plan which the government is aiming for. One of the interesting things that I think many countries fail to do, and I'm not singling out individual countries here, that many governments fail to do, is actually to think long term. Obviously the election cycle in many countries is 4 or 5 years. That seems to be a fairly global standard. The governments need to think longer term. They need to understand the big picture. They need to have a longer term goal. If you look at China, their government has a 5-year plan. That gets renewed every 5 years. The Japanese government tends to think much, much, much longer term. I've heard that the government has a 50-year plan they work to. So Japan has a very, very, very long-term view that they're considering. So they're already making plans for things that could be happening 20, 30, 40, 50 years further. So my personal recommendation, if I could give this to governments, is actually to start thinking much longer term than many governments currently do. And they can see digitalization is coming. They know it's coming. Okay? It's happening. It's already started. This is not something that would be very easy to stop, even if everyone wanted it to, because it's already going at such a speed. So governments, I think, have to think longer term. They have to plan, and it's a good thing that the Malaysian government already has their master plan in place. Okay, so if I could make any suggestions, it would be to try and keep thinking longer term, and give companies something to aim for in the future. If you know in 10 or 15 or 20 years time, this is really where the government is going to be going, not just 5 years in front, think 10, 15, 20 years. You have a much better opportunity for companies to actually make long-term plans, embrace digitalization, embrace the new economy, the new normal, okay? And actually, of course, that gives you an opportunity to budget for it. Not many major companies, let's take the oil industry, for example. That's perhaps a bad example, but the oil industry, they will find an oil well. They know how much it's going to cost them to develop that well. They know how long they're going to have to wait for the equipment to do that. So they actually have quite a long view. So oil companies do take a long-term view on things. We need to get governments and other SMEs in particular to take a similar long-term view and consider those very, very long-term investments in their planning.
No, I think you're right. And I think when we look at what is possible with long-term stability and long-term planning, it actually starts to, as rapidly as the digital economy is starting to move, there's still a basic business reality that people want stability and people want to know that this is the policy of the government. So as a closing remark, I would like to get from both of you, what is your advice to SMEs, to those companies who are saying, okay, we believe you, now we're going to do it. Okay, what are the first steps? What are the first things that they should do?
Okay, having just said, I think take a long-term view. I think that's very, very important for me. Certainly within Radiance Assets, we're trying to do that. We're trying to take a long-term view. We're looking at opportunities. We don't want to make an investment and then in 1 year time we're going to liquidate. We're looking for a long-term plan. We want to partner with our investment companies, the companies we're investing in, as well as our investors. We want to partner with them for a long term and really help develop things for Malaysia, for the Malaysian population, as well as the global economy. Adam?
Yep, and furthering to that, particularly for the business owners, I think we can see that the pandemic has really needed us to move our businesses quickly and to adopt technology in almost every part of our business process. And don't be fearful. I think that's probably would be one of the best advice here. Really think outside the box and help ourselves and our clients to move in the same space as we are, because today our clients are all buying online, and we need to be ready to support them. And this ecosystem will continue to go on. And long-term planning, I definitely concur with Jamie on this. It's not just a 5-year plan. It's not just a 10-year plan. It's really going towards beyond that. And one of the things which we want to cultivate between our merchants that come to us is not just to look at short-term on how to quickly survive the business, but even to go further beyond that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Jamie. Thank you very much, Adam, for your insights today. We really appreciate the time you've given us. One thing I think we've learned is that there's a long way to go with this strategy, and we've still got a lot of work to be done. So with that, I want to thank you for both of you for joining us today. And thank everyone also for joining us, and thank you for your comments, thank you for your questions, and we look forward to seeing you all again on next week's edition of A Working Lunch with Nordin. Thank you very much.
Thank you.